Welcome back to the Insurgent Mindset. I'm Matt Tice.
And I'm Rondo Moses. This is a podcast about challenger thinking in a world shaped by disruption.
And in each episode, we explore the strategies and leadership mindsets that help businesses break from the pack and stay ahead in fast changing markets.
Yes, you'll hear conversations, case studies, and insights from leaders who are applying these mindsets to thrive in uncertain times.
And subscribe to our YouTube channel or follow us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And check out our companion blogs at insurgentsgroup.com for a summary of takeaways each episode. So let's get into it today, Rondo. We have a great guest with us, the managing director of Vistage Australia and New Zealand, Stephanie Christopher, who I've known for a number of years. And she's going to give us a really interesting perspective to talk about the insurgent mindset for mid-market companies, primarily in Australia, but through her association with Vistage in the US, perhaps we'll get a view also what's happening over there, because I think she just came back from the Chair Congress in San Diego. So, Stephanie, why don't you join us and we'll kick off?
Hello, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you, Stephanie.
Welcome, Stephanie.
So, Stephanie, just to kick us off, why don't you tell us your story? Give us a little sense of who is Stephanie, where did you come from, and where are you? And then we can unpack a little bit later kind of where things heading for you.
Absolutely. Matt, you won't even know my story. There's probably some surprises in here.
Can't wait.
Yeah, I have a science background, an applied science background. My first trade was a speech pathologist, so a clinical world for me in my early days. And I worked in the public and private sector, acquired brain injury, and then later my private practice was in pediatrics. So from there, I moved into the family small business for a while and fairly quickly moved into a corporate world, working my way through a variety of organizations, all with a B2B consulting background. My most recent role before Vistage, which is coming up for 12 years,
Mm.
was as the managing director for SHL, which was a psychometric assessment firm. So again, the science was I was really interested in talent management, evidence-based work we were doing there. And then I was approached to join what was then the Executive Connection Tech. And we were a licensee and affiliate of Vistage worldwide. So I came in as CEO to an exciting organization, what was then a privately owned Australia and New Zealand business, which was really interesting for me. And in 2024, so exactly 2 years ago this week, next week actually, we became a fully owned subsidiary of Vistage worldwide. We joined the family, and it's been a really interesting time for us. We already knew the community. We were part of the community. I knew the people that we ultimately sold to, but just to have even closer access, better integration of the research, the resources, the smarts of Vistage, I think it's been great for certainly for us and for our chairs and our members and our speakers, of course, speaking to both of you.
Hmm. Great, Stephanie. So that's great. So, and again, maybe just for our listeners who are less familiar with Vistage, give us a sense of the model. Like, how does it work and what does it mean?
Yeah, great question. So Vistage is a peer advisory organization. So we're the largest CEO coaching and peer advisory organization in the world. So we're a membership organization, and our members have access to monthly meetings, or to a group, most importantly, of non-competitive peers, people like them in similar roles, in similar contexts, but completely dissimilar environments. And that's the power of Vistage. Our groups are facilitated by an experienced business leader, usually a former CEO or business owner. And then there's a lot of elements to the platform. There's a really important element is our resources, our speakers, our experts in particular areas that are so important to small and mid-sized business. They are part of the group experience. And then there's our digital resources as well, with some really interesting. We're just rolling out at the moment Strategic Planning by Vistage, our own point of view and model actually on strategic planning that's just in the early days of rolling out for our members as well.
All right. Well, let's not put us out of business, Stephanie.
No,
Right,
Yep.
right.
as the words came out of my mouth
Yeah,
back in
yeah, yeah,
Rovo,
yeah,
it's not
yeah,
putting you out of business in any way. It will actually be a great setup for our members. So
yeah.
when you're working with them, they'll even know more what they're talking about. Yeah.
I've actually seen it before. One of my the Vistage chairs here shared it with me about 6 months ago. She was piloting one of the pilots of the
Yes.
program. But
Yes.
just a follow on, Stephanie, what's inspires you the most about this work at Vistage and working for a member-based or advisory organization?
Being so close to the customer. This is, obviously I've worked in customer organizations and you had a small number of customers. And as MD, I'd be brought in for something significant, either at the front end of the deal or maybe if there was a problem. Our members, we're so close to our members here, and it is inspiring. And you both know some of the stories of incredible personal and business transformation and growth and incredible success. And also some of our members, we're around for them in really, really tough times and dark times in many cases. And seeing genuinely seeing the difference that Vistage makes in people's businesses and their lives, it is inspiring. And you don't ever get sick of it actually, because it's a new story every day.
Mhm.
That's great, Stephanie. So then one of the things I want to just pick up the is that being really close to the customer is something we really feel strongly about here at Insurgents, right? So we have a term for that. We call it customer proximity.
Yeah.
We talk about that a lot on the podcast. And I guess maybe that's a good pivot point to just get a sense of like, because this is the insurgent mindset, right? On the podcast, we like to talk about stories that leaders bring to the table around their experience in breaking from the pack, disrupting their industry, finding different ways to create value, essentially. And I guess as we sort of move now into the flow of 2026, Stephanie, I'd be curious just as almost a representative for the mid-market in Australia. What does insurgent mindset mean to your members? What are some stories that you could share with us, maybe from your own experience or, from the Vistage community that would sort of embody that sort of core idea?
So there's something really interesting across the board in our members. We see it in Australia. I think it's the same in the US data as well. And that's in our confidence index. And we typically see a higher level of confidence in our members compared with non-members, with other confidence indices that are published. And an insurgent mindset, I think, has to include confidence. It's not the only thing that, you can be confident and very stuck in a legacy business. But I think there's something that drives that confidence. And I think it's being aware of the signals, because when you're in a group like Vistage or when you're with peers, you're hearing from the resources and hearing from the expert speakers about what's coming down the line, but you're also seeing it from what other members are talking about in the group and what other, perhaps other webinars, or it creates that mindset, I think, that you are looking for signals, you are more likely to predict what might be coming down the line. And then I think a peer network like ours provides kind of the courage and the backing to take risks. And we do see that in our members. And I see it in some members that are so interesting. Of course, you go blank when you think of stories, but I can think of a member who, so it's actually a US example, but she was working in the family business. And it was a significant industrial business, a crane company. And her father passed away suddenly during COVID. And she took on the whole business. It was a significant thing to do. But then the disruption in there in automation and in different ways of running the business. So dealing with, and she's, relatively young as a leader in a, not in a typical business, however, it was the family business, but being able to take over culturally what was going on in that organization with the loss of the founder and leader, but then to actually to see the signals of what was going to be important to disrupt, or what could disrupt her industry, and to make the changes and to bring in automation. And she would absolutely attribute a lot of that to the support of a chair in a group encouraging her to take those risks. We saw it during COVID. We saw members switch so quickly to PPE from whatever they were creating to be able to create that, and see a spot in the market and quickly move into that area, which was very significant. And thinking of another member also who was at the forefront of medical research for vaccines in Australia here. We see it in members in Australia who make big international plays, and again are looking for which markets are going to be relevant and where do they think they could make a move, and have been very successful in that area as well.
Interesting. So a couple of terms that you brought up there. One is signal. I love it, right? So we may end up titling this podcast Signal versus Noise. So now you just came back from San Diego, if I'm not mistaken, and no doubt you were talking about these signals as we're looking ahead in 2026. Like, what are the things that mid-market companies need to have on their mind? What are some of the trends that you think are particularly prevalent for your community? And how are your members adapting and adjusting to that?
So the big, well, it's signal, and I think one thing about the insurgent mindset is discernment of signals versus noise. And AI it's on everyone's mind. And what's been really interesting this year in San Diego, and what we've seen in our own confidence index, is the way our members are engaging with AI, what their view of it is now, certainly for 2026. So I was reflecting that it's only 2 years ago, even less than 2 years ago, maybe 18 months ago, we could have an event and have a speaker almost dancing about, look what AI can do. Look what ChatGPT can do. It can, you put in a menu of a restaurant and it can tell you what you could order with your dietaries. It was just, and our members were so interested in that. But in a short time, and it's all moving so quickly, clearly, but our members have become digitally engaged rapidly. And our latest research, this is US actually, research has shown that there's been a 10% increase in CEOs saying they're digitally engaged, to actually 76% now of our members. And importantly, C-suite, a 25% increase in the C-suite reporting digital engagement. So now they're on a par with the CEOs, which is obviously important. And in Australia, only 10% of our members saw AI as a risk or a threat. So that's really interesting for us. And that's something where we can be talking about, where we can add value if this is all moving forward. So that's, well, it was obviously a signal 3 years ago or more years ago. It's not a signal anymore. But I think our members now are really understanding that it's got to be more about, moving from an individual worker and the way that they might be using AI. We've all leaders have had the last 12 months saying, write the email on your own. Now, can you write that in your own words, please? That's great, but write it in your own words. To now the work groups and how it's actually enhancing how work groups are using AI, and then ultimately moving into the whole workforce. And we are seeing our members moving beyond curious now into, how do I apply this? How do I actually gain a competitive advantage here? What investments do I have to make? What team do I need? and at the same time recognizing that the core elements of leading a good organization, like the culture and collaboration, are critical now if you've got a worker trying to move into work groups using AI enhanced work practices and workflows.
No surprise whatsoever that that's a theme. Rhonda, do you want to respond before I ask another question? I've
Yeah,
got
I was gonna say, we've seen, working with our clients and through conversations and just reading about how CEOs and organizations are in, like I said, 2025, we're experimenting, piloting
Mm.
with AI, but the expectation is that 2026 would have to be the year where people start to see actual productivity gains
Yes.
from AI. Are you seeing that middle market CEOs, or does the data show that middle market CEOs are really more focused on what AI can do with regard to generating savings as opposed to growth? Like, where's their focus in terms of how they're applying AI today?
Across the board, we're hearing more about growth than savings. We're not, I mean, it's interesting looking at the market here. However, there's, one of the big four announcing changes across in a line of an administration line, which is really significant. But that's not what we're hearing from our members because they don't have that fat in the business.
Mhm.
We're hearing more about growth, what being more effective, growth, small, quick experiments, and that's the beauty of it. Now, you can build an app overnight. I have a colleague who said he was watching his kids run around the park, and he so just built something and said, "What do you think?" And we're trialing it in a couple of countries 2 weeks later, and we're seeing members really excited about that, and seeing, for both of you, the speakers that our members are really enjoying are those that are coming in and being so practical and teaching a skill so that our members can go away and build things themselves.
Yeah, that's great. It's interesting. I think in the US, the focus initially has been on more efficiency gains
Mm,
using AI,
mm,
but I think that there's going to be the shift this year to your point to growth, and that's
mm.
going to be the focus.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the background data is a bit mixed on this, right? So I think I just sent Rondo a note this morning about a big survey that was done in the US around productivity and AI. And in that survey, it was an indication that less than 10% of CEOs actually have seen the dial turn yet. So
Yeah.
there is this moment that we're at where the promise of the pivot is on the horizon, and it's still just a question mark where that is. But I agree completely with you, Stephanie, this idea of being able to, and I think this is really relevant to the insurgent mindset, right? Because the idea to be able to take an idea, experiment with that idea, implement that idea, and test the market, that compression creates a lot of opportunity for firms to be able to, um, pivot much more quickly, identify gaps in the market and exploit them. For those who are growth oriented and have a mindset that's wrapped around capitalizing on new opportunities for their customers, clients, members, partners, whatever that might look like. There are like an almost unlimited number of opportunities, but um, I feel bad for the CEOs who are sort of only looking inside at how to harvest efficiency benefits out of the
Mhm.
business, because if you start to think about where the real compounding value is, it's growth, it's driving up your firm's multiple, it's finding new sources of value that maybe didn't exist before. So while productivity is important, and certainly here in Australia we have a chronic problem
Biggest
with
issue.
with productivity, and it is an issue. I was actually surprised not to have heard that as one of your issues. So I was going to ask you, like AI, of course, right? That's
Yeah.
the obvious one. Are there other signals that you're focused on?
Well, what I'm seeing here, and it was perhaps alluded to in the US. We're seeing still from a team, the multi-generational workforce is a
Mhm.
challenge for small and mid-sized businesses every single day. Attracting the right talent, um, going back to my past world, and I would never go as deeply into what we, suggested then, but identifying the potential of someone who is in front of you. I know as a leader, it's so hard recruiting people. We can attract people. We've got some great ways to attract people ourselves, but actually really understanding who's in front of you is a challenge. And I think it's hard for CEOs now to adapt to a changing workforce, and I think talent. So if we were doing this podcast in 2000, I could say, well, it's all about the war for talent. And it turns,
Yeah,
turns
right.
out it still is. And it's I mean, that continues to be an issue. So I guess it's less of a signal in that it's already here, but it's still one of the biggest issues for our members, as well as strategy and execution and competitive advantage fits into all of disruption, everything we're talking about. But we still have so many of our members who are absolutely focused on what's the right strategy for my organization and what's my execution. And that, our goal setting sessions are still so popular. And that's just really important for our CEOs.
Right.
How
Yeah.
important is how important are tariffs and the uncertainty in the global economy?
Mm.
Because like U.S. tariffs, for example, I know a lot of mid-market CEOs here, uncertainty is top of mind for them. What about in Australia?
Uh, Interesting, we had a more measured confidence on the economy here compared with the US. There was more,
Mhm.
more of an upsurge in confidence. Um, Tariffs, perhaps earlier last year, was a bigger issue, and a couple of members it slammed, but it's not spoken about as much. It's not really coming up in our groups. So that and uncertainty. Do you know? I think our members are just adapting to it, adapting to, well, where's business? Perhaps some of the shifts in China as a market would be more of an issue for a number of our members, I think. Um, so it it's very different from the US as far as
Mhm.
what we're hearing on the ground here with our members.
Right. And I think obviously in the US you probably experience the higher highs and the lower lows, right? So we're sort
Yes.
of pot of, sort of kind of in the middle there somehow. The highs never quite get there, but the lows never quite get
And
there.
I was going to say maybe to our disadvantage, actually.
Maybe to our disadvantage, right? So,
Yeah.
and I think your point about talent's a really interesting one, Stephanie, in terms of particularly relating the AI point to talent.
Mm.
I was invited to do a webinar with the RCSA a couple weeks
Yep.
ago where we talked about productivity
Mm.
in talent. And one of the questions that came up, which was really interesting, was, how is AI affecting the world of recruiting
Yeah.
and labor? And it was really interesting. On one hand, really streamlining the workflows of the recruiting process for both HR professionals and recruiters, but creating so much noise, right? So
Yeah.
AI generated CVs, and to your point, I don't even know who's in front of me. So I think that challenge is much more acute now. It's not just about trying to the perennial challenge of finding great talent, but
Mm.
you know, uh, how do I know what I have in front of me is a really tough one for CEOs. It's
Yeah.
almost this huge shift. So I think that is fascinating. Now, Stephanie, just pivoting for a second,
Mm.
um, what does the insurgent mindset mean to you as a leader? And if you were to impart some wisdom, maybe as a summary point for our listeners from what you hear from members and in your own leadership experience for mid-market CEOs in terms of how can they be on the front foot? How can they be the disruptor and not the disrupted, the challenger and not, you know what I mean? How can you be, what are your big two, three, five lessons that you would impart?
Uh, Learning, a learning, continuous learning mindset, and learning beyond just broad, curious learning about the world beyond your own experience, and that's where signals come from. Um, Adaptability is
Mm,
is critical, and that's been something that I have been proud of throughout my career, even my clinical career, but adapting to whatever the environment is. So adaptability is so important. And I'm going to throw in another one, it's discernment. Because if you are running small experiments and you're thinking of moving, it's just knowing when to stop. And
mm,
and I think um, if you have that sort of risk-taking entrepreneurial streak and you're really excited to do things, I have learned that it's just as important to be discerning and say this isn't going anywhere. I need to do something else. And I think back to AI, it gives such a great opportunity to do that because you can try something really quickly. You could figure out something on the weekend, try it over the next month, and then call it if it's not going to work. So I think and yeah, boy, agile, but you have to be as quick and as agile now as ever, and that's what I would say to our small businesses, to myself and to our small businesses, but that continuous learning, the agility and discernment is one that I always try to check myself with.
Now, Stephanie, we've not heard anyone talk about discernment, so just give me 2 minutes to try to unpack this. Discernment, how would you define that? Is that about saying no, or is it about making the hard choice, or is it about making that choice more quickly, or all of those things? What's the, like, unpack that for us, please?
I love discernment. It's one of my favorite qualities. We look for it in a chair. What I think discernment is quickly seeing all the elements of what's in front of you. And I guess it's part of signals, isn't it, in any context? But discernment is, if I do this now, I'm going to fall off a cliff. If I keep going here, this is going to be bad, or this person isn't with me. This person isn't right for this. Make a quick move on it because this
mm,
person isn't
mm.
with me and where I need to be. So discerning is being able to judge a situation, backing yourself on it, really trusting your own, I guess it's judgment and instinct is a part of discernment, but someone with the skill or the competency, I guess, of discernment has that judgment, um, uh, I guess, an element of EQ to be able to read people as well, but to be able to understand a situation, understand all the elements of a situation, and have the judgment to see whether the consequences are going to be positive or for you or against you if you make a move.
Yeah.
So,
It's
Stephanie,
interesting.
is
I
that
mean,
critical thinking then really ultimately at the heart of that? And then the ability to apply that critical thinking to real world situations quite quickly?
What an interesting discussion. You could discuss whether it is,
right,
whether they're
right.
the same thing or not. I guess I'm describing critical thinking, but I think of discerning, there's an element of gut in it too, a
Yeah.
really nice part of gut. And I think that's important to be insurgent.
Well, it's interesting because what I'm hearing, and correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing you say is really how do you get to faster decision making, right?
Mm,
And
mm,
we had a guest on who was a CEO of a hospitality tech platform company, and he talked about how one of his regrets was that he wished he had made some decisions sooner.
yeah,
So back to your point, he was a first-time CEO. And he said that he wished he'd made some decisions that, he later made, he wished he had made them sooner.
yeah.
So yeah, that ability to take in the information quickly and then make a decision and move forward and adjust as necessary, I think is important too. I agree with you.
Well, it's the balance of judgment and discipline. I can
Yeah.
remember, and it was years ago back in my SHL days where I heard a psychologist talking about the different parts of the brain, but those people who really use gut, but in an intelligent, that it's one absolute form of leadership, and
Hmm.
and it's always been mine. Again, perhaps sometimes it's more of the discipline to go with it. Probably would have served
Yeah.
me better, but I think that that's a huge part of discernment. And so critical thinking, Matt, could be an overlay, could be part of it. It's a whole broad area.
Yeah. It's like
Okay, but I think
avoiding
there's some,
analysis paralysis, right?
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's something interesting here, Stephanie, that we haven't explored. So forgive me for pushing this
No,
thing
loving it.
ahead, right? So, so gut, right? So,
Mm,
and I agree, right? So, if we can kind of develop this idea a little bit, like how do you develop your gut, right? In a sense of, partly it's a function of experience and having been in situations, over and over, or in having your sort of mindset tested and stretched. Sort of gut ultimately sort of evolves to these heuristics that we use to make decisions.
Mm.
Is that fair? Now, if this is a key component, how do you and how do you think about helping leaders develop the muscle to a build a gut that's a strong decision filter, and then learn to trust that gut, and then most importantly, use that gut to make hard decisions. I think that's, to me, the flow. Um, but we don't talk about this very much, how to develop this skill set, right?
Yeah, we talk about it actually at Vistage of, well, it's the gut in a decision model. So if you're starting with your instinct, and that's what I say, that's got you to where you are. If you're in business, if you're a business leader, you've got to have some sort of instinct. But then the developing it, yes, judgment comes from experience, but it's perspectives. I think perspectives that's what really helps you
Mm.
build your gut, because then you're testing it or you're hearing it, and we do it at Vistage. This, if I were you, I'd do this and this, and you're listening to yourself thinking. So it's being open to perspectives, but then
Right.
trusting it's about you and it's your decision and what you're going to do. And some people can have a terrible gut. I love what Seth Godin says about, not Seth Rogen, Seth Godin says about decisions. There's no bad decisions. The decision is the decision. It's the outcome that might be good or bad, and you should decouple it. But some people, that their instinct is just off. And I guess there's a nature nurture. I suppose if you know that inherently you do have good instinct, you do have you trust your gut, you are a discerning person naturally, then I think growing and developing it and enhancing it and bringing in perspective, so you're getting better at testing, am I right or am I wrong? You're kind of doing your own experiments on yourself. I think that's how you can grow to be a better leader in this world, this context.
Yeah, and in some way, maybe in the Vistage context, you're almost forced to expand your perspective because you're going to borrow the perspective of 11, 12, 14 other people, plus a speaker, plus a community, right? So I guess maybe that idea of how to accelerate that notion is quite helpful. I know for my own part, like people always ask me, what business books are you reading?
Yeah.
And I generally say very few. What I like to read are things peripheral to business that can offer a completely different perspective. It's
Mm.
kind of like the innovator's way of thinking about things.
Mm,
Um, and that way, then you can find a creative space and, you know, hone the gut, I suppose, a little bit
mm.
over time. But it is a tricky one. There's a great Teddy Roosevelt quote I think you've heard me talk about before. In a moment of making a decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing and the wrong is the wrong thing. And the worst thing is nothing,
Yeah.
right? So I think almost what you're describing is this inner notion of the inner signal, right?
Mm.
So we've been
Mhm.
talking about the external signals, but the inner signal is really important too. Is that fair?
I love that. I think it is fair. And well, that's where signals come from, isn't it? Because you're starting to feel something or you're noticing something or you're thinking, that's the third time I've seen that. But you're right, the inner signal is the discernment. Yeah, but that's just noise. That's just that'll pass. And for me, I'm as interested in culture as business. I'm really
Mhm.
interested in what I'm seeing in the world and what I'm seeing in different generations, and what younger people are talking about, or what's moving on, and seeing what that relates to in the broader world. But yes, I do like the inner signal, and then there's that whole conversation of the inner signal versus the inner noise.
Mm.
Someone gave me a great quote that said something really interesting the other day about CEOs all feel the impact of what's happening in their world the same way. whether it's a multi-billion-dollar business or your own growing $16 million business, whatever's happening with team, whether you're winning or losing that month, you're all feeling it inside in the same way. And I think that's really interesting.
Mm.
I have a follow-on question. So I think this idea of discernment and signals is really important. And I think that's why I think you sort of wrote about this online, I think, Stephanie, about having diverse teams, right?
Yeah.
So that you are getting, you mentioned the point about perspectives, not just your Vistage peers, but inside your own organization, you have your C-suite, you have others in the organization, in particular, the front line of the organizations who may be, closer to the customer than you are. They
Yes.
have perspectives to bring in and say, how do you value all those different signals coming inside your organization and even outside with the customers to then ultimately make a decision that you're more comfortable with, you're more confident in, right? That to me is what it is, as opposed to thinking that you, as the leader, have to have all the answers without input outside.
And that's the
Yeah.
trap. And that's the
Yes.
trap. Because when you're listening to your internal signals, you've got to be careful that you don't just think that's the answer. I'm
Right.
feeling this. I know this is what we need to do here. And maybe you're right. Maybe you do know, but you have to get other perspectives and be open to
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And for me, when I think about diverse teams, it's people who think and operate differently from you. And that's really hard as a leader when you're moving fast. If
Hmm.
one of my most valuable leaders in my organization operates completely the opposite from me. She likes time to think about it, and when I'm, come on, what are we doing? What are we doing? What
Yeah.
are we doing? What
Right.
are we doing? And I think she's not with me, but actually she comes back a day or two later, and it's wonderful, the perspectives that come back or building on
Yeah.
my ideas. Yeah.
And sometimes that's why it's important to have the contrarian in the group
Yes.
who can bring that different perspective because you don't want yes, yes, yes when you could miss something with that. So you need that different perspective, that contrarian that's going to may pull you out to see something that you might be missing.
I think so. I agree with that. And I think it has to also be productive. Uh,
Yes,
Not the
absolutely.
negative person,
Hmm.
the contrarian. I think there was kind of a bit of a run with certain fields over the years where people were kind of taking that as a sport almost, and
Mm.
missing opportunities by finding a way to say no, and we'll have to test that, and we'll have to take forever to test that, and you missed out on things. So absolutely, absolutely different ways of thinking, definitely. Yep.
Mm. Sort of this conversation reminds me a little bit almost of the one-way door, two-way door. Have you
Yes.
heard this
Go
before?
on. I think I have
So,
from you,
like
but
in
tell
an
me again.
indecision
Yeah.
context, right? There's a one-way door is I make a decision and then I can never walk that decision back,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Mm.
It's permanent and immutable. And a two-way door is I can make that decision and walk it back if I need to, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's really helpful to kind of understand, particularly in a faster, more dynamic, agile world as you've described it, that most decisions are two-way doors, not one-way doors, right?
Yes.
So
Hmm. Hmm.
Yes.
it really is like almost decision ship is how do I build the muscle to make decisions? But to your point, being really clever and almost intentional about how I absorb the signals, the inner
Yes.
signals and the outer signals. I think that's really interesting territory, particularly because I don't think that leaders are trained overtly to do this. I think they're expected to learn it on their own. And the ones that do learn it, um, they go on really well. But the stories we don't hear are the ones where they just didn't get there and they sort of dropped out of the pack. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do know what you mean. And I think work environment or environments can beat that out of you too. Or for those of us who've grown up in different corporate worlds, it's often disregarded. And so the self-doubt could really kick in over time if if that is disregarded. So where I'm going here is as a leader, if you've got someone with that skill in your organization, spot it and nurture it and help them build that because that's a really powerful person in your team to have that skill set.
Just one quick thing, Rondo. I don't want to interrupt you because I know you got an idea, but I'm stuck on this.
No, no.
So Stephanie, I love it, right? So how do we nurture people?
Yeah,
Now reflect, absolutely. But I also reflect on, you know, maybe, some of the world conquerors are
yeah,
younger leaders, right? Who haven't learned
yeah,
to not trust the world, not, they haven't learned that helplessness that you almost described there,
yeah. I get
where
it.
hey, let's just go,
Yeah,
right? But I think that equally for established leaders, maybe we could call them incumbent type leaders,
yes.
to use some of our language, to discover how to unleash young people to
Mm,
go and do things and stay
mm,
out of the way and to nurture those opportunities. And I think that we have to break this hierarchical sort of model
yeah,
to allow organizations to move more quickly in this environment. And many of the things that have served us really well in terms of how we build companies are starting to break down in this world of AI, in this world of really fast disruption, in this world of, gosh, of just noise, right? Um, Doom scrolling, whatever
Uh,
it might be.
well, yeah, totally, totally. And I get the idea with noise, and I understand what you're saying about, young people who haven't been, haven't been wearied by
Right.
experience. I think a challenge there as a leader can be there's a lot of noise. So as a discerning leader around you, if you're seeing people saying, "Don't stop me, I've got this, I know what I'm doing," and you know that it's just heading off in noisy directions, that's I think that's an additional talent management leadership challenge now for
Mm,
leaders, which is again bringing in a strong gut and judgment, strong self-awareness, so you're not thinking, am I threatened here,
mm.
or is this something that could be perhaps be shaped into a direction that could really help the organization thrive.
Terrific, Stephanie. Now we're going to have to wrap up. What's ahead for you in 2026? And then we'll let you get back to your busy schedule. But and just on behalf of the Insurgent Mindset, thank you for joining us.
What a fun conversation. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. Unexpected, which is great, as it should be on this podcast. 2026 is not more of the same, it's growth here. And for us, it's practicing what we're preaching or what we're involved in. It's picking up what's around us, making experiments, but sticking to the course. We have a very clear strategy, which I'm really enjoying because I can be pulled off and excited by other things. I'm excited about the clear strategy, but how can we absolutely innovate within that? And that's what's ahead. We've got a good year ahead, actually. Looking forward to it.
Outstanding, Stephanie. Thank you so
Wonderful.
much, and it's always a pleasure to see you. And we'll try
Uh,
to get you on again, maybe a little bit later to probe these issues a little bit more. So thank
Love
you
it.
so much for
Love it.
sharing your perspectives.
Great to
Now,
speak to you both.
just for our listeners, I just want to remind you to find us on Apple, YouTube, and Spotify, and we look forward to hearing from you again, Stephanie. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure, Stephanie.